Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Run It Back, the show where we try to get things right the second time. In today's episode, we're going to be going over an Outlaws of Thunder Junction premiere draft, a best of one draft, where one of our new friends to the AGL server submitted over to us saying, hey, I thought this draft was good. We ended up going 1-3. Let's take a look and see what we might be able to find out for that person. Taking a look at Pack 1, Pick 1, we've got a couple of good options here. I really have liked this Armadillo. I think 7/7 is just too big. There's nothing in the format that deals enough damage to it, with Trick Shot being the most amount of damage you can deal with that. And also, Ward 3 is just impossible. I mean, if a Murder were to deal with this thing, it takes 6 mana. A Shoot the Sheriff might be one of the most efficient. Otherwise, you're just going to have to attack and block and deal all that. Now, if you can't get to 6 mana, that's okay. You still discard this card and search for a desert or basic land and gain 3 life along the process. Helps with fixing, helps with mana bases. I really like this as a pretty easy Pack 1, Pick 1. There is this Step Between Worlds. I haven't played this card. I'd be pretty hard pressed to play this card, but there is probably a world where it could probably happen. And then, of course, we've got Primal Command and Prairie Dog. We'll kind of talk about both those. Primal Command being a very good supplement to a lot of your green decks, but you can do some green decks without this card. But I don't mind a Prairie Dog pick, with the rares kind of being meh as they are, and both all the rest of the uncommons sort of being preferential. We can hope to wheel something like the Holy Cow, the Giant Beaver, God forbid the Spinewoods Armadillo. There's lots of ways to go for this Prairie Dog. Even the Daring Thunder Thief I wouldn't mind with this card as well. Pack 1, Pick 2, I see a Bovine Intervention, a Deep Muck Desperado, a Lasso by the Law, man, a Make Your Own Luck. Not bad packs here overall. Holy Cow, Failed Forwarding. Now, so this Lasso by the Law is the most powerful card. Obviously, with the Prairie Dog, we kind of want to start taking things that we can either plot or cast at instant speed. So I wouldn't mind like the Failed Forwarding. I wouldn't even mind this Deep Muck Desperado, because this sort of wait 'em out strategy is going to look pretty good if you have 2 or 3 of these, and you can not only mill them, but also just sort of hold down the fort while your Prairie Dog is getting bigger. But nobody can really ever fault you for taking a Lasso by the Law. I think this is a great pickup here. Pack 1, Pick 3, we see a second Prairie Dog, and I don't really care what the rest of the pack looks like. I'm going to snap this thing off. They're great in multiples. They really want you to just sort of hang back. You can activate 1 or 2, just kind of depending how things go. And this pack really isn't that terribly strong. Rise of the Varmints, I don't mind. A Voracious Varmint, I don't mind either. But the rest of the stuff is just sort of middling at best. Probably Mourner Surprise would be my third pick after these other 3 cards. Pack 1, Pick 4, we're taking a look at a couple of options here. Doc is still going around. I don't think this is as powerful as it reads. Geyser Drake looks really good in this sort of style deck. We haven't really picked up our second color, but you pretty much want to be in blue-white if you're going to be picking Prairie Dogs in the go past sort of strategy. Outlaw Medics keeps us in white, mainly just because Geyser Drake isn't that exciting. You also have things like Spring Splasher and Sterling Keykeeper. Now, Outlaw Medic looks like a really good card on the surface. In fact, it was in my top 10 commons. It doesn't play out nearly as well with all of the different mercenary tokens that come around. 1/3 just sort of trades with lots and lots of different things. So I might be a little bit lower on this card than I was a couple of days ago, and I have been a little bit higher on this card than I was a couple of days. Now, non-mount is a big deal. There's certain decks where that just does absolutely nothing for you, so you really need to make sure you're going towards the right decks and strategies. But I'm always playing one of these in my white decks. I think they look good. I'm also always playing this in my blue-white deck. Even though we don't have any instants quite yet, we're gonna be picking them up, so that way we can pass the turn with Prairie Dog, cast our flash or instant spells, and having them be 1 cheaper can make for big turns. Pack 1, Pick 5. We've got this another round. I don't think this card is particularly strong. We also have a couple of other, blue and white cards as well. We decided to go with the Ruthless Lawbringer, even though it's a very powerful card. It's not necessarily what we want to be doing with Prairie Dogs, but it does work out really well with both Lassoed by the Law and the Outlaw Medic. These give things that we want to sacrifice, and having something to sacrifice those things in order to get something else looks really good. Also, keeping an eye on things as Raven of Fell Omens. This is a very, very powerful card. Nobody really ever wants to kill it, because you're going to be using one of your premium removal spells like Thunder Savo, Desert Stew, or Shoot the Sheriff on this 1/2 Stormcrow. But committing a crime is super simple. Dealing a damage or having an opponent lose a life and you gain 1 life each turn is huge. This is super simple to turn on over and over and over again, and it works out great every time. Pack 1, pick 6, we see another round. I don't think this is, likely going to be anything here. We do see another Sterling Keykeeper, which I think kind of looks pretty good, particularly if Ravens are going to be going around. Steer Clear is also good, but not fantastic here. I wouldn't mind this for the sideboard, but seeing as we're best of one, I'm probably passing this one as well. Fault Plunderer is a pretty obvious pick if we're going into white-black. I might take the Mercenary here just to kind of keep this as a speculative pick, but it looks like our AGL friend is going to be moving into white-black as an archetype. Pack 1, pick 7. We've got a couple of options here. White-black does definitely seem to be open. I see lots of white cards, lots of black cards. We even still have a flash card here. Throw from the Saddle is great, man. There's just lots of good cards in this pack. I don't mind this Rooftop Assassin. I also don't mind this Boneyard Desecrator as something just to continue to sacrifice to, but I think Baron Bertram Greywater is it. I mean, this is the card as a signpost uncommon. He's a legendary creature that, gives you more things to sacrifice, lets you sacrifice those things, and in general just kind of gives you what you want to be doing. So I think I'd rather have this pick back, and I know we have lots of creatures right now, and I know that the +1/+1 counter on each creature is good, as well as destroy target artifact or enchantment, but frankly, except for like Oblivion Ring style cards like Lasso by the Law, I'm just not seeing that many enchantments I care about. As far as artifacts are concerned, you do have pretty much everything from the big score, but with those things being pretty rare and far between, and half of them not being very good, I'm just not worried about those either. So 2 mana, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control as a sorcery is not particularly strong, even though it plays out well with Prairie Dog. Like, you can 7 mana, like make it +2/+2, but I think just getting your value with this 4 mana 3/4, continuing to sacrifice artifacts and creatures, I think in general this is exactly where you want to be. So I would rather have this Baron Bertram Greywater rather than the Requisition Raid here. Pack 1, pick 8, we see a Mirage Mesa. I think that's a little bit of a mistake here. I know we want to do our fixing, but this card is kind of middle on fixing, and Raven of Fell Omens is a very strong card. Super, super good. Pecks in for usually 4 or 5 damage over the course of a game. Also ends up gaining you at least 2 to 3 life over the course of the game, and God forbid you get multiples. Each crime trigger ended up doing a small lightning helix sort of style. It's just unbelievable. Pack 1, pick 9. We get a Holy Cow here. Holy cow. As well as I see a Desperate Bloodseeker and an Ambush Gigapede. I actually think this Holy Cow is great. It's one of the cards we were looking at wheeling. I think it plays perfectly with the Prairie Dog. I also don't really ever mind sacrificing it if we need to. I think Holy Cow is a great pickup here. Happy to see this one wheel. Pack 1, pick 10, we see a Boneyard Desecrator. I don't love any of these cards. It's not like there's really anything going on. So sure, you can have this Desecrator. It kind of works out pretty well here. Notably, if it ended up scrolling back to Baron Bertram Greywater, it says if 1 or more tokens enters the battlefield, make a 1/1 Black Vampire Rogue. And we scroll over here to the Boneyard Desecrator. If you sacrifice an Outlaw, create a treasure token. These kind of go semi-infinite once a turn, where you just you sacrifice the rogue that Bertram makes, and then that gives you a treasure, which therefore then allows you to make another 1/1. So they just sort of go infinite, putting 1/1 counters on your Boneyard Desecrator and making treasure tokens, which you can then pay 2 mana to sacrifice back to Bertram. I don't love this Boneyard Desecrator very much, but in a Baron Bertram Greywater deck, I think those two on the battlefield are huge. Very good together. Pack 1, pick 11, we see a Wanted Griffin. I think this is fine. You could go after a Moaner Surprise, but we also could probably pick one of those up later. Not been thrilled with this Griffin, but also I've not been upset with it either. It is exactly fine. Pack 1, pick 12, we're going to see a Ruthless Lawbringer come back to us, and this is a good sign that we're supposed to be sort of where we are. So obviously that blue-white deck hasn't really panned out for us, but the black-white deck definitely is coming in. Also good to see another Sterling Keykeeper here as well, as this plays really well against those big red-green threats as they come down on the battlefield. I'm thinking Spinewood's Paladin, even if you need to, the big Spinewood Armadillo, 5 mana to do it's obviously pretty tough because of the ward cost on the Armadillo, but if you got to do, you got to do, and that really helps you get in there. Pack 1, pick 13, we see this Inventive Wingsmith. I'm probably not playing this, but, it's fine. Moving on to Pack 2, pick 1. We see another couple of decent cards here, but Prairie Dog has got to be awesome, right? Like, how many of these Prairie Dogs do you need? I want them all, right? You keep dropping them down, and then eventually they get bigger and bigger and bigger. If you need to take a turn off, just so that way they get bigger themselves, they give you ways to sink in your mana. You've got, threats that you can take care of. One of the things I'm noticing that we're missing right now is a whole lot of instant speed interaction. I'm talking about Murders. I'm talking about Desert Stew. I'm talking about Shoot the Sheriffs. We want to be on our eyes here looking at Pack 2 or 3 to pick some of those things up so that way we can pass with Prairie Dog and not lose tempo. Pack 2, pick 2. Outcaster Greenblade? That doesn't seem like that's where we want to go. I don't mind this Bighorn. I don't mind a Steer Clear. This Outcaster Greenblade is fine, but we're not splashing it right now. I should hope not. We've got plenty of other things that we want to be doing. I wouldn't even mind taking like Rare Draft of Breaches here if you don't want any of these cards. But in reality, this Bridal Brigand the Bridal Bighorn is likely the card that you want. It pretty easily saddles for almost anything you have in the deck, and then also ends up giving you more 1/1s to sacrifice with things like Boneyard Desecrator, or God forbid, even just +1/+1ing all of your 1/1s at some point. This Bighorn is likely the pick here for you. Pack 2, pick 3. We take a full steam ahead, and it seems like we're going a little bit off the rails here. A full steam ahead down that way. Now, this pack, again, not really a whole lot for us. I'm not playing this Wingsmith. The Gigapede is fine. A Corrupted Conviction, I suppose, probably plays well in this deck, if nowhere else. And so I think this Corrupted Conviction is likely where we want to be going, because that plays really well with things like the Desecrator. Also plays well with the Bighorn, had we taken that, or Baron Bertram Greywater, had we taken that. So this is probably the official pick. Vraska joins up, or the Pest Control. I'm probably not playing either of these cards, but if you want them for your collection, you could take them there. Pack 2, pick 4, we end up getting a Mystical Tether. We're back on track. This is exactly what we want. I don't mind the Desert Stew here just because it's a little cheaper, but we don't have that many deserts, so, I can kind of get in the Mystical Tether. Last thing I want to point out is this Arid Archway plays really well with your Prairie Dogs, because a lot of the times you have to take a turn off in order to put this down to kind of gain the card advantage from it, because this counts as 2 lands, which I think is great. Plus, it also plays well with the Prairie Dogs that you can end up getting to that 5 mana as well a little bit easier. But, Mystical Tether's one of the best commons in the set. I don't mind having this one at any point. Pack 2, pick 5. We're moving more into green. We've got a perfectly good pair of removal spells here in Desert Stew and Ariad's Lullaby. I think I'd much rather have both of these cards than the Stubborn Burrow Fiend. I know we have lots of creatures for the Burrow Fiend, but we really should not be splashing at this point. We don't have the fixing. We've got plenty of good cards to be taken here. We should be taking black or white cards in Pack 2, pick 5. Pack 2, pick 6. More green cards. We've got perfectly good white cards. Man, this card is awesome. Trained Airings. Like, why would we ever turn this thing down? You put it down, you start attacking. It helps you scry and fix your other things. 3 power first strike is very, very good. I think it's much better than 3 mana 4/2 that maybe gives trample sometime. I think the trouble with this is you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've got these huge Prairie Dogs and they can't get in, and this helps you get in. But if you're casting all of your creatures and sorcery spells, your Prairie Dogs in this deck are no better than 2/2 Lifelingers, which, don't get me wrong, is perfectly fine. But, in this deck, they're 2/2 Lifelingers here. So I think we want this Trained Airings. I know that kind of, goes along the similar fashion of just casting creatures, but this Trained Airings is significantly better than Drover Grizzly, even in the green-white deck. This is the card that you want over here. Pack 2, pick 7. Okay, we look at a Lush Oasis. Which I don't mind. I think the Vengeful Townsfolk and the Corrupted Conviction both play a little bit better. If we were in the Baron Bertram Greywater and having that the other token producer, the Bighorn, I think this Townsfolk is likely where I would want to be. But even if, let's say, you want a land, I think you want this Blooming Marsh, right? Like, it taps for black, which you're playing. It taps for green, which you're also playing. Whereas this Lush Oasis, sure, it deals 1 damage to the opponent, but you're not playing any blue cards here. So I don't think you want this Lush Oasis at all. I'd much rather take probably the Townsfolk if we had drafted as we were in a vacuum. Looking back at this pick individually, I'd take a look at this Blooming Marsh over the Lush Oasis. And then also this Corrupted Conviction is something I still think we want to pick up at some point. Pack 2, pick 8. We have another Mirage Mesa that we're looking for. This might be the deck for Fel the Mighty, mainly just because you have a lot of 2 and 3 power creatures, and so therefore this would be a reasonable card against green, red, and green strategies in general. But outside of that, which is a little speculative, I like all 3 of these cards, right? Vengeful Townsfolk, because your creatures are going to be dying and trading off. Outlaw Medic is great sacrifice fodder for your Restless Lawbringer and your Boneyard Desecrator. And Skullduggery is one of the best tricks in the format. Allows you to attack them with all kinds, your whole board. They block the way that they want, and you can win 2 combats here while having this Skullduggery giving -1/-1 to one of their things and a +1/+1 to one of your things. It just is super powerful. Also, if we had those Ravens that we might have talked about earlier, this is a super cheap way in order to get those to trigger. So Mirage Mesa, not a terrible pick here, but I think there's a lot more power that we're leaving on the table. Pack 2, pick 9. We see Lava Spur Boots. I don't really love this card in general. I think even though I'm not a huge fan of the Black Snag Buzzard, I think that plays really well with these Prairie Dogs, right? Because then you can end up plotting it rather than actually casting it, and that still gives you the opportunity to get your +1/+1 counters. Then on the following turn, when you do cast it, you're still not casting it from hand, which means the Prairie Dog doesn't care about that, and that way you end up able to get this thing on the battlefield. You get 2 counters on your Prairie Dogs in the process. And in general, you're not wasting your mana by just passing and doing nothing. Pack 2, pick 10, we see a Map the Frontier. I don't think this is a Map the Frontier deck because as of right now, we're splashing green, and we don't really want to be continuing to go heavily into that. Another Boneyard Desecrator sort of fills that Baron Bertram Greywater role that we had missed out on earlier, so I don't mind picking this up, or if you want your rare for your collection, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter in this situation. A Lazav, I don't think we're ever playing. I think we're getting a little bit countered here on this Lush Oasis saying, oh, we can splash this too. I don't really mind the Lazav splash over the green splash. There's lots of green going on here that I just don't think is super powerful. And Lazav being able to sort of take care of some things and get bigger and bigger is fine. Otherwise, just Corrupted Conviction. We've looked at this a couple of times, with the amount of 1/1 and sort of creatures that we want to be sacrificing or could have been sacrificing. Corrupted Conviction's a great card late in the format. Pack 2, pick 12. Taking a look here, we see 2 Oasis Gardeners and a Decimate. Right now, I'm not sure what colors we're playing, but it seems like we're sort of off black-white on its own. If we need to be playing this green, we probably need to be playing an Oasis Gardener, mainly because it gains some life fixes, and then once fixing's not a problem, then you can end up starting to take out, you sacrifice it to things like the Ruthless Lawbringer or your Boneyard Desecrator. If you're back just on white-black and we don't want any of the other splash cards anymore, then sure, you can take the Decimate for your collection, but I'm not playing this card, right? This is not something we're playing. The problem with Decimate is you need an artifact, an enchantment, a creature, and a land on the battlefield, and if your opponent doesn't have them, you have to target your own, otherwise you can't cast this thing at all. Pack 2, pick 13, a Steer Clear. This is fine. Unfortunately, we didn't get any of the premium ones here, but we wouldn't expect these to wheel anyway. Steer Clear is okay. Pack 3, pick 1. We see a couple of really important cards in general. Nothing here for like the white-black deck, unfortunately. Now, this Generous Plunderer, this is a card that I would be willing to splash for. I know we haven't splashed anything so far, at least we're not really sure, but if I was in solid white-black, this card would be worth it because it helps sort of fix for itself, it generates artifacts, it deals extra damage, it is an outlaw, and then you can start sacrificing your own treasures to that Baron Bertram Greywater that we passed to draw cards. This card is nuts. It's nuts on its own. It wins the game on its own, and it's super good, super early. Wouldn't mind a Rictus Robber, so that way you can end up plotting this, getting counters on your Prairie Dogs. On the following turn, you sacrifice something with the Lawbringer, kill something of your opponents, and then you end up getting a zombie out of it. This is probably the pick if we're just solely in the white-black shell, but it looks like we've got a Patient Naturalist to kind of help us with the Abzan list, I suppose, that we're going for. I think, again, if we're going for Abzan, the lands are just better fixing because this is something that would just replace a swamp, and now it's, a blooming marsh, which is really powerful. Patient Naturalist requires you to already have green mana. This helps you fix for that green mana. So I think if we're stuck on the Abzan train, then I think I'd want this blooming marsh, or even Conduit Pylons, I suppose, over the Patient Naturalist. But blooming marsh is sitting here right in the face. Pack 3, pick 2. We see something like Congregation Gryff. We've got Fierce Retribution here. Harvester of Misery plays really well in certain decks and not so great in other decks, so I don't mind that one altogether. Actually, it looks like, based on how things are going, we might be moving into green-white with a little splash on Ruthless Lawbringer. I think that's probably fine. Congregation Gift works well, but as we take a look at what the deck currently looks like, we don't really have any other mounts. We've got this Grizzly Bear, we got the Burrow Fiend, and that is it. So, looking all the way back to the Trained Arinx, that would have been a card I'd look at. I also don't mind Snakeskin Veil if we're shifting into green-white, I suppose. Fierce Retribution also looks good, but if we're still in that black-white shell, like Harvester of Mystery is great, right? It's a removal spell if you need it early. Otherwise, it's a 5/4 menace that can end up wiping some of your opponent's creatures. Notably, in the black-white shell, when you have lots of little dudes, you don't necessarily always want to be casting this. So that can be a little awkward, I understand, but I don't know. Then you just discard it as a -2/-2, and I think that's great. Pack 3, pick 3 is Seraphic Steed. This is a great card, and I'm happy to splash this one or move into a green-white strategy as that sort of looks. This is a great one to pair with the Congregation Gryff as well as other things. Happy to see this card. Pack 3, pick 4. I don't really love a Wanted Griffin. 4 mana for a 3/2 is like not that much better than a 2 mana 2/2. And if we're already playing things like this Requisition Raid, I think I'd much rather just have a creature that kind of does it better. You play this thing on 2 and your opponent doesn't even want to be playing cards that end up getting killed by it. So therefore it has not only the threat of activation, but all the while it's still a 2/2, which is a very valuable body in today's day and age. 2 mana 2/2 for with upside. Also, for Fierce Retribution, I don't mind. This is something particularly in a green-white deck you're likely going to be attacking. You're likely going to get attacked back, so Fierce Retribution is great. Even if you're not attacking and you got your Prairie Dogs here, eventually they swing in, you block with the dogs, they trick you, and then you have this Fierce Retribution on the backswing. This card is pretty much awesome all the time. Pack 3, pick 5. This is a toughie, right? Because we don't have Void Rend. We already have 2 Lawbringers. Not sure if we want another one. Mortar Surprise is fine. Vault Plunder, we're kind of off of. Vengeful Townsfolk is okay, but, you know, that's more in the black-white deck. Don't mind a Mirage Mesa, but we've already got 2, so, like, how many of those do you want to be playing? This is tough all the way around. I don't mind a Townsfolk. I probably would take this Lawbringer as it sits, but I don't mind a Townsfolk pick. Pack 3, pick 6. I see... not a whole lot here for us. Not sure what this Doc Arlok pick is about. If we're going to end up picking a nothing pick, which this kind of is, just grab like a land for constructed formats or even, you know, a bonus sheet card that you might not normally get. We're not playing pretty much any of these cards, so grab something that's worth a wild card. Pack 3, pick 7, we got a Forlorn Flats. I think this is fine. And obviously, we're kind of in the point where now we're splashing black, and so picking up that splashable is great. If we are back in black-white, splash green, this back for more looks really good. And then, of course, this Blood Hunter is a pretty phenomenal card. One of the reasons why this card is great is it's self-sufficient. You don't see that very often. You do with things like Prairie Dog, which is what makes it really good. But Blood Hustler also just, 4 mana, opponent loses a life, you gain 1 life, and then you also get your crime trigger. If you had your Ravens that we sort of looked at from earlier on, Ravens play extremely well with Blood Hustler as well, right? Because then it turns into a Lightning Helix for 4 mana and a counter. If you have 2 Ravens on the battlefield, this card just gets nuts. So I would keep an eye out for something like this in the future as well. Pack 3, pick 8. What is this card still doing here? This card is insane. I understand we want things for trigger or whatever. Like, this card is nuts. Beginning of combat, draw a card, and then you can end up making, a 3/3 Seraphic Steed if that's what you draw. I mean, you can sort of put pretty much anything artifact or creature on the battlefield and make a 3/3 golem. This card's insane. We should not be passing this card unless you've got another insane bomb as well. Pick this one up just about any time you can. Much better than any other card in this pack. Pack 3, pick 9. We got another Outlaw Medic. This is more of a black-white card. I don't really love it in green-white. I want to be playing more impactful things, like my squirrels and other such things. But I suppose this is a fine pickup. Pack 3, pick 10. I don't mind a Dance of the Tumbleweeds. I think it's actually a perfectly reasonable card, but it's more so in like a green-black or green-black, green-red strategy where the big sort of power and toughness really matters. I think here this Drover Grizzly, even though I'm not very high on it, is where we're at, right? You want mounts. You want to make sure that we've got mounts on the battlefield. Also, this can saddle your Seraphic Steed on turn 3 right away. You play the Steed on 2, play this thing, you saddle, you get your 3/3, and sort of go off to the races that way. So I think between these two, I want to be playing this Drover Grizzly over a Dance of the Tumbleweed. We got a Patient Naturalist here, which is fine. Another Patient Naturalist, which is fine. A Vault Plunderer, which is fine. And then a Highway Robbery, which is fine. All right, taking a look at the deck here, I can see we've got quite a bit going on. 3 Prairie Dogs is our great, sort of gem in the crown here. These cards are awesome. Unfortunately, they don't really play so well as if you're trying to curve out, because then they're just the 2/2 lifelinkers. But having a Seraphic Steed and a Congregation Gryff and even a Stubborn Burrow Fiend, like, these cards are all your good ones. And then we've got a lot of just sort of middling cards. Outcaster Greenblade, I guess we're playing a couple of extra deserts just to make them bigger. That's fine, I suppose. This Drover Grizzly's Enabler. The Vengeful Townsfolk can get big, I suppose. But just in general, we've got a lot of them just sort of medium cards. I'm not thrilled about playing really any of these cards over here. And frankly, even in this deck, an Outlaw Medic, these cards are all just kind of mid. Taking a look at the non-creature spells, happy to play most of these. I think Steer Clear is much better in the green-white deck, which looks really good. Requisition rate I'm kind of off on, but it's fine. The whole point of this sort of strategy is going to be put some threats on the board that matter, and then remove the other things while you tempo them out with 4-power creatures or the like. In theory, we should be hopefully getting this Seraphic Steed down, Drover Grizzly, and then sort of going from there. But the follow-up plays of like Wanted Griffin, like this is not a great card. Patient Naturalist, not terribly aggressive, much better in like the green-black sort of fixing strategy. It does play well with the Stubborn Burrow Fiend, I'll grant you that, but I don't know, 3 of these things, meh, just kind of meh in general. Not happy with that part. So I think there definitely was opportunity here to go into like a green-white shell. I don't think that was a super huge misplay on our drafters' part, but I think this black-white deck would have been much better than where we ended up in green-white. Sure, we ended up getting the Seraphic Steed, but in theory, we could either have splashed this card, or there's also that other red mythic out of Big that makes treasures. That would have been just as good of a splash in our black-white deck that could have been had we gone down a little bit of a different road here. Thank you so much for submitting your deck. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a thing or two. And, of course, I hope things go a little bit better for you than the 1 and 3 this draft ended up on. If you want to have your draft covered on Run It Back, feel free to send me an email at runitbackmtg@gmail.com or a message over in Discord with 17 lands data. We'll take a look just like we did this one and see where we might be able to improve what might be a little bit better next time. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.